when arrogant musicians were destroyed and humiliated by Jimi Hendrix. The Gauntlet Throne. London, late 1966. The city was a swirling vortex of fashion, art, and music, a vibrant canvas where tradition clashed with revolution. Carnaby Street pulsed with new energy, and the air crackled with the promise of change. Yet, in the smoky, intimate confines of the Bag O' Nails Club, a different kind of tension simmered. The established order, the blues rock purists and the technically proficient but emotionally sterile guitarists, held court. They believed they knew the limits of their instrument, the boundaries of their craft. Among them was Reginald "Reg" Thorne, a guitarist whose fingers danced across the fretboard with a precision that bordered on clinical. Reg was the darling of the London blues scene, lauded for his lightning-fast runs and impeccably clean tone. He played a vintage Gibson ES 335, preferring its warm, articulate voice to the rawer, more aggressive sounds emerging from the burgeoning psychedelic movement. To Reg, music was a science, a series of scales and arpeggios executed with flawless technique. Emotion, he believed, was a byproduct of mastery, not its driving force. That night, Reg's band, the Blue Apostles, had just finished a blistering set, leaving the crowd buzzing with appreciation for his intricate solos. He leaned against the bar, nursing a scotch, accepting the adulation with a practiced, almost bored air. Another night, another triumph, he thought, catching the eye of a young journalist scribbling furiously in a notebook. Then, the stage lights dimmed, and a hush fell over the room, replaced by a murmur of curiosity. The next act was an American, a relative unknown named Jimi Hendrix, recently arrived from New York. Whispers had circulated about his wild stage presence and his unconventional approach to the guitar. Reg had heard the rumors, playing with his teeth, setting his instrument on fire, and dismissed them as cheap theatrics, the desperate antics of a showman trying to mask a lack of genuine talent. Just another loud American, Reg muttered to his bassist, a sneer playing on his lips. Probably can't even play a proper 12-bar. Jimi Hendrix walked onto the stage, a lean, almost ethereal figure clad in vibrant, psychedelic attire that seemed to defy the drab London night. He cradled a Fender Stratocaster, a guitar Reg considered too bright, too brash for serious blues. Hendrix offered a shy, almost deferential smile to the crowd, then plugged in. The first chord hit like a physical blow. It wasn't just loud, it was a wall of sound, thick with distortion, yet strangely melodic. Hendrix didn't just strum. He attacked the strings, coaxing a primal scream from his instrument. His fingers, long and agile, moved with a fluid grace that belied the raw power he unleashed. He launched into a blistering rendition of Hey Joe, but it was Hey Joe as no one had ever heard it. Reg's initial disdain began to waver. He watched, fascinated, as Hendrix bent notes to their breaking point, then beyond, using the tremolo bar not as a mere vibrato tool, but as a sonic weapon, twisting and warping the pitch with audacious abandon. The feedback, which Reg had always meticulously avoided, became an integral part of Hendrix's sound, a controlled howl that soared and dipped, a living entity woven into the fabric of the music. Then came the wah-wah pedal. Reg had seen them, dismissed them as a novelty. But in Hendrix's hands, it was a voice. The guitar didn't just cry. It spoke, articulating phrases, mimicking human speech, wailing and moaning with an almost supernatural expressiveness. It was a conversation between man and machine, a dialogue that transcended mere notes and chords. The crowd was mesmerized, swaying, shouting, completely lost in the sonic maelstrom. Reg found himself leaning forward, his scotch forgotten. He watched as Hendrix, mid-solo, leaned back, his head thrown back, and played a searing lick with his teeth. It wasn't a gimmick. It was an extension of his body, a primal connection to the music. Then, he played behind his back, his fingers still finding every note, every bend, with impossible precision. Reg's jaw tightened. He had always prided himself on his technical prowess, his ability to execute complex passages with surgical accuracy. But Hendrix wasn't just playing notes. He was painting with sound, using the entire sonic spectrum as his palette. His music was visceral, raw, yet imbued with a profound emotional depth that Reg's own clean, precise playing suddenly seemed to lack. When Hendrix finally brought the song to a crashing, feedback-drenched halt, the club erupted. The applause was deafening, a roar of approval that vibrated through the floorboards. Reg felt a strange mix of awe and resentment. He had witnessed something truly revolutionary, something that challenged every preconceived notion he held about the electric guitar. Later, as Hendrix packed up his gear, Reg approached him, a forced casualness in his stride. "Loud, aren't you?" he said, trying to sound dismissive. Hendrix turned, his eyes, dark and intense, meeting Reg's. A faint, knowing smile touched his lips. "Just trying to make it talk, man," he replied, his voice soft, almost shy, a stark contrast to the sonic assault he had just unleashed. "Trying to make it say what's in my soul." Reg had no retort. His carefully constructed world of musical rules and technical perfection had been shaken to its core. He had come to scoff, to dismiss, but he left with a nagging doubt, a seed of unease that would grow into a profound reevaluation of his own artistry. The gauntlet had been thrown, not with malice, but with a pure, unadulterated explosion of genius. And Reg Thorne, for the first time in his celebrated career, felt utterly, profoundly inadequate. If you're captivated by the raw power and revolutionary spirit of Jimi Hendrix, make sure you don't miss out on more stories like this. Subscribe to our channel to dive deeper into the legends and untold tales of music history. The Speakeasy Club, London, mid-1967. Our You experienced had just exploded onto the scene, a sonic supernova that redefined rock music. Yet, in certain circles, a lingering skepticism persisted. Many established musicians, particularly those rooted in traditional blues or jazz, still viewed Hendrix as a flamboyant showman, a novelty act whose theatrics overshadowed any genuine musical talent. Tonight, the Speakeasy was hosting an impromptu jam session, a gathering of London's guitar elite. Sir Malcolm "Mal" Sterling, a revered blues guitarist known for his soulful, understated playing, sat on a stool, his eyes closed, coaxing mournful notes from his hollow-body Gibson. Across from him, Trevor "the Axe" Davies, a flashy rock guitarist whose solos were a blur of speed and technicality, traded licks with a jazz fusion bassist. The air was thick with cigarette smoke, expensive cologne, and the self-assured confidence of men at the top of their game. "Heard that Americans album?" Trevor scoffed, wiping sweat from his brow after a particularly intricate run. "All noise and feedback, if you ask me. No real structure. Just a lot of volume." Mal, ever the purist, nodded slowly. "He certainly has a unique approach to distortion. But the blues, Trevor, it's about feeling, about telling a story, not about setting your guitar on fire." He chuckled, a dry, dismissive sound. Just then, the club door swung open, and in walked Jimi Hendrix, accompanied by Mitch Mitchell and Noel Redding. He was dressed in a velvet jacket, his hair a magnificent afro, his presence radiating an almost otherworldly charisma. A hush fell over the room, a mixture of curiosity and thinly veiled judgment. "Look who it is," Trevor whispered, nudging Mal, the man himself. "Wonder if he brought his lighter." Hendrix offered a polite nod to the assembled musicians, his gaze sweeping the room. He seemed to sense the undercurrent of skepticism, the unspoken challenge. Someone offered him a spare Stratocaster, a battered instrument with rusty strings, clearly not his own. He accepted it with a gracious smile, plugged it into a small, unassuming amplifier, and tuned it with a few effortless strums. Then, he began to play. He started with a familiar blues riff, something Mal Sterling himself might have played. But within seconds, it transformed. Hendrix didn't just play the notes, he massaged them, bending them, stretching them, making them weep and wail. His thumb, a powerful, almost independent entity, danced across the low E string, laying down a rhythmic foundation that was both solid and impossibly fluid. Then came the wah-wah pedal. Mal had heard it before, but never like this. Hendrix used it to articulate entire sentences, to mimic the human voice with an uncanny precision. The guitar wasn't just singing, it was talking, pleading, confessing. He made it scream with anguish, then whisper with tenderness, all within the space of a single phrase. Trevor, who prided himself on his speed, watched in stunned silence as Hendrix's fingers moved with a deceptive ease, creating cascades of notes that were not just fast, but deeply expressive, each one imbued with purpose and emotion. Hendrix closed his eyes, lost in the music, his body swaying with an almost hypnotic rhythm. He leaned into the amplifier, coaxing controlled feedback, not as a chaotic burst of noise, but as a sustained, melodic drone that added layers of texture and intensity. He would hold a note, letting it sustain for what seemed like an eternity, then dive into a flurry of rapid-fire licks, only to pull back, leaving space for the music to breathe. Then, the moment that truly silenced the room. Mid-solo, Hendrix brought the guitar up to his mouth and played a complex, soulful passage with his teeth. It wasn't a trick, it was an extension of his musical vocabulary, a raw, visceral expression that bypassed the conventional. The sound was clear, articulate, and utterly breathtaking. Trevor, who had dismissed such antics as mere showmanship, felt a chill run down his spine. He realized that for Hendrix, the guitar was not just an instrument. It was a living, breathing extension of his soul, and any means necessary to express that soul was valid. Mal Sterling, who had initially scoffed at the noise, found himself captivated. He had spent decades perfecting his blues technique, focusing on purity of tone and traditional phrasing. But Hendrix was showing him a new dimension, a way to express the deepest blues emotions with a sonic palette that was infinitely richer, more expansive. The raw, untamed energy, the fearless experimentation, the sheer audacity of it all, it was overwhelming. When Hendrix finally brought the jam to a close, the silence in the room was profound, broken only by the soft hum of amplifiers. No one applauded immediately. They were too stunned, too humbled. Mal Sterling slowly opened his eyes, a look of profound wonder on his face. Trevor Davies, the flashy axe, stared at his own guitar, suddenly feeling its limitations, its sterility. Their instruments, which had felt like extensions of their own mastery just moments before, now seemed inadequate, almost primitive. Hendrix offered another shy smile, a quiet, "Thank you, man," and began to unplug. He hadn't sought to humiliate them, but his sheer, unadulterated genius had done just that. He had shown them that the boundaries they had so carefully constructed were merely illusions, that the electric guitar was capable of sounds and expressions they had never dared to imagine. The arrogant musicians, who had come to judge, left with a profound sense of awe. Their musical worlds irrevocably expanded, their egos gently but firmly shattered. What's your favorite Jimi Hendrix performance or song, and why? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We love hearing how his music has impacted you. June 1967. The Monterey International Pop Festival was more than just a music event. It was a cultural watershed, a vibrant explosion of the counterculture, a gathering of tribes. For many American audiences, it was their first real encounter with the phenomenon that was Jimi Hendrix. In the weeks leading up to the festival, buzz had been building around the Jimi Hendrix experience, particularly after their explosive success in the UK. But for many, especially those steeped in the folk and blues traditions, or the more structured rock of the time, Hendrix remained an enigma, a rumor, a wild card. Among the skeptical was Gary the Maestro Peterson, a classically trained guitarist who had reluctantly embraced rock music, seeing it as a necessary evil to reach a wider audience. Gary prided himself on his theoretical knowledge, his intricate chord voicings, and his ability to play complex jazz-inflected solos with precision. He found much of rock music simplistic, its raw energy often masking a lack of musical sophistication. He was at Monterey to see the real musicians, the folk troubadours, the soulful blues singers, the technically brilliant jazz players. He'd heard about Hendrix's stage antics and dismissed them as crude showmanship, a distraction from what he presumed was mediocre playing. Another one of those loud, flashy types, Gary muttered to his girlfriend as they found their spot in the teeming crowd. Probably just a lot of noise and feedback. Give me a proper melody any day. The sun began to set, casting long shadows across the stage. The air was thick with anticipation, a collective hum of excitement. Then, the Jimi Hendrix Experience took the stage. Jimi, dressed in a flamboyant, almost regal outfit, his guitar slung low, seemed to absorb the energy of the crowd, his presence instantly commanding. He launched into Killing Floor, a blues standard, but it was immediately clear this was no ordinary blues. The The sound was immense, a tidal wave of distorted guitar that was both brutal and beautiful. Gary, initially bracing himself for a cacophony, found himself involuntarily tapping his foot. Hendrix's rhythm playing was a masterclass in groove, his left hand a blur of chords and muted notes, his right hand attacking the strings with a percussive force. Then came Foxy Lady. The iconic riff, thick with fuzz and wah-wah, snaked through the air, instantly recognizable, yet delivered with an intensity that was almost frightening. Gary watched, mesmerized, as Hendrix used the wah-wah pedal to make his guitar moan and scream, a seductive, almost human voice. He wasn't just playing a solo. He was telling a story, a passionate, primal narrative that bypassed the intellect and went straight for the gut. Gary, the classically trained musician, found himself struggling to categorize what he was hearing. It wasn't just blues, it wasn't just rock, it wasn't just R&B. It was all of it, and none of it, fused into something entirely new. Hendrix's use of feedback, which Gary had always considered an undesirable byproduct of high volume, was now a deliberate artistic choice, a controlled shriek that added texture and emotional weight. He manipulated the tremolo bar with a fluidity that made the guitar sound like it was melting, then reforming, a liquid soundscape. The performance built to a fever pitch. Hendrix played with his teeth, behind his back, but it wasn't just spectacle. Each move was integrated into the music, an extension of his boundless energy and his deep connection to the instrument. The crowd was in a frenzy, a sea of swaying bodies and ecstatic faces. Gary, who had come to critique, found himself swept up in the raw emotion, his analytical mind momentarily silenced. Then came Wild Thing. Hendrix tore into the song with a ferocious abandon, his guitar screaming, feedback howling, the stage presence electrifying. He knelt before his amplifier, coaxing waves of sound, then stood, his guitar held aloft, a shaman conducting a ritual. And then, the moment that would forever be etched in rock history. He poured lighter fluid over his Stratocaster, knelt before it, and set it ablaze. A collective gasp, then a roar, erupted from the crowd. Gary watched, stunned, as the flames licked at the guitar, consuming it in a fiery sacrifice. It wasn't a gimmick, it was a declaration. It was a statement that music was more than just notes on a page, more than technical proficiency. It was passion, it was sacrifice, it was a primal scream of creation and destruction. In that moment, Gary Peterson's entire perspective on music shattered. He had always approached the guitar with a cerebral detachment, focusing on precision and theory. But Hendrix had shown him that the instrument was capable of so much more, that it could be a conduit for raw emotion, a tool for spiritual expression, a weapon of sonic revolution. The guitar burning wasn't an act of disrespect, it was an act of ultimate devotion, a symbolic offering to the gods of rock and roll. Gary felt a profound sense of humility, a realization that his own carefully constructed musical world had been too small, too constrained. He had been so focused on the how that he had forgotten the why. Hendrix hadn't just played the guitar, he had reinvented it, showing everyone present that night, and countless millions who would later witness the footage, that the electric guitar was an instrument of infinite possibilities, a voice for the voiceless, a conduit for the soul. The arrogance that had once defined Gary's approach to music melted away in the heat of that burning guitar, replaced by a newfound awe and a burning desire to explore the uncharted territories of sound. If this story is resonating with you, please hit the like button. Your support helps us bring more incredible tales of musical genius and transformation to life. The flames of Monterey may have consumed a guitar, but they ignited a revolution. Jimi Hendrix's brief, incandescent career left an indelible mark on music, forever altering the landscape of rock and roll. His destruction of arrogant musicians wasn't an act of malice, but a necessary shattering of ego, a forceful demonstration that true genius transcends technicality and embraces boundless innovation. The musicians who had once scoffed, doubted, or challenged him found themselves, in the wake of his brilliance, transformed. Reginald "Reg" Thorne, the blues rock purist from Chapter 1, never played his Gibson ES 335 quite the same way after that night at the Bag O' Nails. The clean, precise solos that had once defined his style now felt sterile, lacking the visceral punch he had witnessed. He began to experiment, tentatively at first, with fuzz pedals and wah-wahs, trying to coax new sounds from his instrument. He started listening to feedback, not as noise, but as a potential melodic element. His playing evolved, becoming rawer, more expressive, infused with a newfound emotional depth that surprised even himself. He never achieved Hendrix's level of revolutionary sound, but he found his own voice, one that was richer and more authentic than before. The arrogance of his technical superiority had been humbled, replaced by a genuine curiosity and a deeper understanding of the guitar's potential. Sir Malcolm "Mal" Sterling, the revered blues guitarist, found himself re-evaluating the very essence of the blues. He realized that while tradition was important, expression was paramount. Hendrix had shown him that the raw, guttural cries of the blues could be amplified, distorted, and manipulated into a sonic tapestry that was both ancient and futuristic. Mal began to incorporate more dynamic range into his playing, allowing notes to sustain and feedback to bloom, pushing the boundaries of his own soulful style. He often spoke of Hendrix not as a rival, but as a messenger, someone who had taken the blues to places no one had dared to imagine. His initial dismissal had given way to profound respect and a renewed passion for pushing his own artistic limits. Trevor "the Axe" Davies, the flashy rock guitarist, learned that true showmanship wasn't about speed or tricks, but about the sheer force of musical personality. He saw how Hendrix's every move, every grimace, every interaction with his instrument was an extension of the music itself. Trevor began to focus less on simply playing fast and more on playing meaningfully, on crafting solos that told a story, that had peaks and valleys, that connected with the audience on a deeper level. He still loved his flashy licks, but now they were imbued with a soulfulness he hadn't possessed before. The humiliation of feeling his own playing inadequate had spurred him to seek a deeper connection with his instrument and his audience. And Gary, the maestro Peterson, the classically trained rock guitarist, underwent the most profound transformation. The Monterey performance had been a revelation, shattering his intellectual approach to music. He realized that the raw, emotional power of rock was not a weakness but a strength, a direct conduit to the human spirit. He began to shed his inhibitions, to play with more abandon, to embrace the imperfections and the visceral energy that Hendrix had so masterfully wielded. He started experimenting with unconventional tunings, with effects pedals he had once disdained, seeking to make his guitar talk in ways he had never considered. Gary became a more adventurous, more soulful musician, forever grateful for the moment Hendrix had burned away his arrogance and shown him the true, untamed heart of the electric guitar. Jimi Hendrix himself, despite his revolutionary impact, remained remarkably humble and generous. He wasn't interested in destroying other musicians. He was interested in pushing the boundaries of music itself. He often jammed with other guitarists, sharing techniques, encouraging experimentation, and inspiring countless individuals to pick up a guitar and explore its infinite possibilities. He opened doors for Black musicians in rock, proving that talent knew no color, and that the electric guitar could be a powerful voice for cultural expression. His legacy is a testament to his genius. From the controlled chaos of his feedback manipulation to the vocal expressiveness of his wah-wah pedal, from his mastery of distortion to his ability to play with his teeth or behind his back as an integral part of his musical statement, Hendrix redefined what the electric guitar could do. He didn't just play songs. He created sonic landscapes, immersive experiences that transcended mere performance. The arrogant musicians weren't truly destroyed. Their arrogance was. Their egos were humbled, their perspectives broadened, and their musical horizons expanded. Hendrix didn't just show them how to play the guitar. He showed them how to feel it, how to live it, how to make it an extension of their deepest selves. He liberated them from the constraints of convention, inspiring them to seek their own unique voices in the vast, unexplored territories of sound. In the end, Jimi Hendrix's genius wasn't about tearing others down. It was about building something new, something revolutionary, something that elevated everyone who dared to listen and learn. His music remains a beacon of innovation, a reminder that true artistry knows no bounds, and that sometimes The most profound lessons are learned when our preconceived notions are utterly, gloriously, and irrevocably set ablaze. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the transformative power of Jimi Hendrix's genius. If you've been inspired by this story and want to explore more tales of musical legends and their impact, please subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. Your support helps us continue to celebrate the artists who changed the world.